Joe Biden officially signed the Social Security Fairness Act. And so it is now official and it is the law of the land. Now there's a group of people who are very happy about this, and there is a much larger group that is very unhappy about this and even angry. And so what are the details? Who qualifies? Who's going to be getting an increase in their Social Security benefits? Who is not? And what is all the anger about? And so this Social Security, this law called the Social Security Fairness Act, right? And many people are calling it the Unfairness Act because I think it has backfired because it has got a very large group of people feeling cheated and not happy about it. So I promise to make this video simple, and I want to make it really easy to understand these details so that you're clear, because I know there's a lot of confusion and a lot of misunderstandings around this. So I'm going to give you a summary of what this is all about, and then I'm going to give you the two perspectives. And I'm going to show you some actual numbers so that you can really get your head around this. So this has to do with the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. So what is that all about, right? That applies to people who had a non-covered employment. Non-covered means that they were not paying into Social Security. So examples are people that were employed through the state government or federal government, where part of their compensation is a pension. And during that time, they did not pay the FICA tax, they did not pay into Social Security, because they're basically paying into this pension program instead. And so there's no problem with that. If someone was to work, and we're talking policemen, firefighters, school teachers, any government workers that they have a non-covered pension, they did not pay into Social Security while they're working. And if their whole career was in that government job, then they would never qualify for Social Security benefits because they never paid into Social Security. That's crystal clear. There's no questions about that. So what happens is when and there's about 3 million of these people, right, where they did have a government job, they had a non-covered pension, but that was only for part of their career, not their whole career. So they reached a point where they ended their job. Maybe a police officer worked for 20 years, qualified for his pension, and then he worked for another 20 years in the private sector. That's where this comes into play. And so while these folks are working in the private sector, they are paying into Social Security. The FICA payroll tax is coming out of their check. And just like everyone else, they have to have at least 40 credits to qualify for a Social Security benefit. So 40 credits, that's equal to about 10 years of work. So if someone worked in their government job and then they worked in the private sector for, say, 9 years, they're not going to get any Social Security benefit at all because they didn't qualify, just like everyone else. You have to have at least 10 years of work history to qualify for your own benefit, okay? And so there are many of these folks where they did qualify for Social Security benefits, okay? And so now where the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset comes into play was they say, okay, now these people are going to have a government pension and a qualify for Social Security. And now why would that be considered a windfall? Because that's what it was. They're saying this is going to be a windfall for these folks. And so the provision, the WEP and GPO provision, laid on top of their benefits and reduced them down. So for example, you'd have people who they're looking at their Social Security statement, just like you and everyone else. They're looking at their earnings history. They can see that they've qualified for a benefit. They can see what the estimated benefit is on their statement. And so they kind of get that number in their mind of what that benefit might be. And then they come to find out, if they didn't understand this, that the windfall elimination provision is going to drastically reduce that Social Security benefit. So there are people who, they think in their minds they're going to be getting, let's say, $1,200 a month. and the WEP would kick in and GPO would kick in, and they'd be getting maybe like $400 a month. So it drastically would reduce what their benefits were. Now, if they didn't have that WEP reduction, you might be wondering, why would that be considered a windfall? Because they paid into Social Security. Let's say that they worked for 20 years in the government. They worked for 20 years in the private sector. The way that the benefit is calculated is based on your best 35 years, right? And so if they only worked for 20 years, then their benefit's going to be lower because they didn't have 35 strong years, right? They had 20 years of paying into Social Security. And so it seems on the surface like that would be fair. And there's a reason why it's not fair. And it's because Social Security is weighted towards low-income people. So I'm going to give you some examples and some numbers here to make it hopefully easy to understand. So in this first example, this is going to be assuming that the worker worked in the private sector their whole career, and they have 35 years of earnings at least. And so, and then they retired in 2024 are the numbers I'm using. Okay, so first, starting with an income of, let's say, $100,000 a year, let's say that was their average over their career, then that would give them a benefit at their full retirement age of $3,134. That is a replacement rate of just 38%. So that's meaning it's replacing what their average income was at a 38%. Okay. Now, let's say that we have an average annual income of just $36,000 throughout for 35 years. In that case, the benefit would be $1,641, and it has a replacement rate of 55%. So as I said, Social Security is weighted towards lower income. And so the lower income folks, I mean, yes, when you have a higher income, your Social Security benefit's higher because you've paid so much more into the system, but you're not getting as much out from a percentage standpoint as someone with a lower income. So it is weighted in the favor of those with lower incomes. Let me show you another example with an even lower income. Let's say we have an average income of $24,000 a year, 35 years. That would produce a benefit of $1,321, and it has a replacement rate of 66%. Okay, so you can see that much more is being weighted towards those who have had lower incomes. Now let's bring it into a comparison where we're looking at someone who has 15 years of covered employment in the private sector, okay? And before that, they had 20 years working in their government job with a pension. And so now Social Security takes their best 35 years, right? But for 20 years, they have zeros. 20 years, they didn't pay into the system. But for 15 years, they did pay into the system. And so now let's take a look. What that does with the average is those zeros bring down the average. And so it weights, so it gives them a higher percentage on the payout. That's the windfall. Okay, so in this example, instead of a 66% replacement rate, they get a 90% replacement rate. And so they are truly experiencing a windfall. There was a lot of bipartisan support to fix WEP and GPO. It's been something that people have been nagging on and complaining about for 40 years. And everyone was pretty much on board saying, yeah, we need to correct this because it was too repressive to those who had paid in Social Security after they had a government job. And it wasn't fair. And why wasn't it fair? If you go back into the 1980s when they were putting this together, they didn't have all the data. They didn't have the computers and the technology that we have today. And so they made estimates. So the windfall elimination provision, GPO, were based on estimates. And those estimates proved to be, at a disadvantage to those. And so everyone was saying, yeah, let's fix this. But then in the end, it got pushed through and they were just completely repealed. And so now it tilted it in the other direction to where there is a windfall for people in that situation. So now why are the other people, and we're talking like 97%, most people. So this applies to about 3 million people, but there's 67 million people that are on Social Security. And so the vast majority don't get the increase. And the vast majority is upset about this, not just because they didn't get an increase, but because it makes Social Security that much more, on shaky ground. It's already got issues, right? It's going to run short about 2033. And now this thing comes with a price of, another $190 billion. And so they're upset about that. It wouldn't have had to be quite that much. Anyway, there's a lot of things that can be done to stabilize Social Security. Social Security has been in the past, where it was in not great shape, where the trust funds were about gone completely, right? And then they made some adjustments. And so I do believe there will be adjustments, and I don't think there needs to be a ton of worry around Social Security being cut. I mean, yes, there's some tough decisions to be made, but I know one of the things one of the solutions that's thrown out there a lot is the wage base. So right now it's $176,100 of wages. You pay the FICA tax. If your income is above that, then you stop paying the FICA. And so a lot of people would like to remove that cap altogether, which is just another way of saying increasing taxes. And so there's a lot of reasons why I think taxes are going to be higher in the future. And so that it really creates a new reason or the importance of good tax planning in your retirement plan. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make when it comes to Social Security is that they look at it as, kind of with blinders on. They're just, it's one piece of a retirement plan, and they're kind of ignoring everything else, and they just look at Social Security. Now, if you talk to the Social Security office or one of the employees that work in the Social Security Administration, you need to just be aware of what they are good at and what they're not good at. They are not financial planners, right? And so it's kind of like if you're looking at one puzzle piece of a retirement plan and you make your decisions ignoring the other issues, that's where we see a lot of mistakes. That's where you can end up paying more taxes in retirement. And so that's what I would say is the number one mistake, is not taking a holistic view. Because, this Social Security person, and you may have a real knowledgeable Social Security expert or someone who's, a seasoned employee with Social Security Administration. They know all the ins and outs. But that person does not know taxes. They don't know your withdrawal rates and sequence of returns risk issues. They don't know about required minimum distributions and the taxation of an overall retirement plan. And so just make sure you have a comprehensive plan. And so I talk more about that in this other video. The idea is one of my more popular videos on Social Security. Hope you'll check that out. And I hope you'll like and share this video with others. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Financial Fast Lane.